Entry 39 from Monday, June 19th, 1964. This is another one that runs about 2.5 pages, and it starts with the Monday morning staff meeting. So take us back to that.
Yes, as a result of the discussion the previous week, a commission meeting was scheduled for the afternoon of Monday, June 29. There was a staff meeting in the morning that lasted for a couple of hours, which was intended both to outline to the staff what the commission intended to do, and also to get caught up to with the various status of materials being generated within each area. So there was discussion about such matters as preparing a table of contents, considering whether they have a chronology in the report, and to report on the findings of Oswald's finances, and so forth, and so on. Issues were raised about whether there should be a subject matter report, and to what extent any deletions from the transcript of any kind should be permitted. And as to the latter point, the general position was that there should be no deletions or amendments to the transcripts except as were required to reflect accurately the questions asked and to report accurately on the answers given. And there was a memorandum on that subject prepared by Stuart Pollock that was circulated the following day. Various other subjects came up about the publication of the report and what ought to be included, and what had to be done before we could proceed exclusively to deal with the report. For example, in concluding any depositions that remained to be taken, to review the transcripts that had been generated by these depositions, and so forth and so on. So there were a lot of details that had to be discussed and resolved in order to put this package of material together in something that was comprehensive but also readable and supportable. Again, there was a controversy at the staff meeting with respect to the interrogation of Marina Oswald, and there certainly were contentions made by Mr. Jenner and Mr. Coleman, in particular at this meeting, that Marina Oswald, in her most recent appearance, had not been sufficiently cross-examined by Mr. Rankin. And Mr. Rankin wasn't particularly able to defend himself, but Norman Redlick attempted to point out to the critics that there really was nothing that could have been asked of her which would have developed new information. And he said that it was clear from her previous testimony that no great reliability should be placed on her testimony. I mean, given her situation, the fact that she had lied early on to the agencies left some members of the staff after 2 appearances that really whatever she said, should be listened to, but shouldn't necessarily be taken as the truth. So the staff was standing by during the afternoon because they expected to be called by members of the commission to come in and help the commission members decide the questions that were being put to them by the Chief Justice. But in fact, there was no request for their assistance, and the members of the staff who remained available to be called were, I think, very, very discouraged that the commission found no need to engage them in helping the commission decide decisions in the areas in which they had expertise. So at about 6:30, the word came out that the members of the staff were free to leave, which a few members did. The rest of the staff met until the commission meeting was concluded about 6:45, and at that point, my entry, I reflect the fact that about 6 staff members joined me in a meeting with Mr. Rankin to hear his report. And I'll quote from the entry. Mr. Rankin indicated that the commissioners had done a considerable amount of reading and that the meeting had gone well. He said they had resolved the first 51 questions and did so unanimously, reserving decision on a few matters. He made notes of the meeting, which he subsequently had transposed and distributed to Mr. Redlick and me. A copy of the Commissioner's rulings is contained in my chronological file. And then I went on to report that Mr. Ball at this meeting began to itemize again, in some respects, his complaints with the way the investigation had been conducted. He complained that he had not been treated appropriately as a consultant and was critical of General Rankin and those of us who were involved in the editing process. He was here, as in other areas, he was trying to secure support from other members of the staff and seized on the fact that Jim Liebler's memorandum on motive, which had been reviewed by the commission members, but had been rejected by them, notwithstanding their assessment that it was extremely well written. So Joe Ball, in an effort to enlist Jim Liebler's assistant, said that Liebler's product was so outstanding that it should be published independently of any work that the commissioner did. So the Ball was unable or unwilling to join us for dinner, and Mr. Rankin later indicated to us that he planned to call Ball further before he left for California on Tuesday. So late that evening, now this is the evening where we did all stay together, Norman and Rankin and I met to see where we were, and we assigned and reassigned certain sections to Norman, to Stuart Pollock, and the appendix, and so forth and so on. So anyway, we in management, having been chastised by Ball, went out to dinner and then regrouped to proceed forward. And I don't know, maybe my entries later on indicate otherwise. I don't know whether Rankin, in fact, was able to soothe Joe Ball down and make him feel respected and wanted as an important contributor to the Commission's report.
Mr. Ball is a very colorful character.
He was a very colorful character, and undoubtedly was of a character that he could alter in trial as it seemed appropriate, and was obviously very good on his feet and very persuasive to ordinary people, which juries are generally consist of.
It's worth pointing out with regard to Marina Oswald this statement that is clear from her previous testimony: no great reliability should be placed on her testimony. That is, in stark contrast to this idea that in early February she was the star witness, the most anticipated witness by the entire world.
Well, it's not inconsistent. It's just she was all of those things before she appeared, and she remained all those things as when she was called back. And this was Norman's view, which actually I thought was pretty strong, and I didn't really expect that from him. But in fact, he was there, and he saw the witness, and I didn't. So I respected his judgment on it. And what I don't know, and I'm not sure I recorded anywhere, whether he changed his view to some extent after she appeared for the last time before the commission in September.
I know that we don't have time, obviously, to go through all the different questions that were put before the commission, but it's worth pointing out that beginning on page 232 of your book, you do go chapter by chapter and list these questions, and in many cases indicate, where the commission members found the answer satisfactory, where they wanted more investigation and so forth. It's a very useful section of the book, I think, to go chapter by chapter and see that. So I just wanted to make a note of the page number.
Yeah, well, it's also important that, as you just suggested, that it wasn't either yes or no, that sometimes the commission, with their three shots, yes, but when it came to other items, they did want some more investigation, and they were and that was useful to get that kind of direction. And they also reserved some of the most important issues. And obviously they've done 51 of the 72, so I think one of these entries will probably report that they addressed the remainder of the issues at a meeting that they held shortly after this one.
I know that motive is, I think, coming up in another entry, but at some point I do want to talk briefly about the difficulties that you had trying to approach that very challenging topic. I do think it comes up when we talk about the psychiatrists coming in and giving their testimony, so we'll table that till we get further on, but that is worth talking about. For right now, I think that finishes up this entry.